Dr. Rosekind, Senator Blumenthal and I have a bill, the Early Warning Reporting System Improvement Act, that requires automakers to automatically provide more documents about potentially defective cars to NHTSA, and requires NHTSA to then make more of that information available to the public so that it can protect itself. And we can't get back the 117 people whose lives were lost to the GM ignition switch defect. We can't get back the 8 people whose lives were taken by exploding Takata airbags. But Dr. Rosekind, you do have, right now, the authority to implement many of the changes that the Markey-Blumenthal Early Warning Reporting Bill requires. You can take permanent measures, even without a new law, to put information about fatal defects into the hands of the public in case NHTSA's analysts fail to spot the next ignition switch or exploding airbag defects. You can look at the families who lost their parents, children, spouses, or siblings because of these defects, and you can tell them that you did everything you could to make sure that their lives weren't lost in vain. Dr. Rosekind, will you call for a NHTSA rulemaking to require automakers to provide the early warning documents that alert them to potentially fatal defects to NHTSA, and to have NHTSA then make this information public?
The agency and I will do everything we can with the transparency of the agency to try and make that information available. Numerous examples already raised. If the information had been available, that could have helped to save lives. And our interest will be to look at that and make sure that our current legal requirements related to privacy, confidentiality, wouldn't actually impede that objective.
Will you do a rulemaking, Dr. Rosekind, in order to make sure that there's a formalized process to ensure that the information goes to your agency, and then the agency discloses it to the public so that they can protect themselves?
And I will commit to looking at what shape that could look like, knowing what our current legal obligations are versus confidentially. Just very simply, the manufacturers have that data. They don't have the federal restrictions we do related to confidentiality and privacy, for example. They could post that now.
Will you do a rulemaking, Doctor, consistent with the Privacy Act and confidential proprietary information to ensure, through the rulemaking, that any information which you can make public will be made public, and that the auto industry will be forced to give you that information? Will you conduct a rulemaking to achieve that goal?
I will determine whatever we can do for transparency, I'll determine whether or not a rulemaking is even needed.
Well, so you will do everything then that is allowed by law to ensure that the auto industry will provide you with the information about defects, and that NHTSA will then release that information? You will do everything that is allowed by existing law?
That's what we will look into and make sure that we can provide that transparency, yes.
And you're saying that you do not need a rulemaking in order to accomplish that goal?
And that's what I have to look at what those legal conflicts are. So if it's
Will you do a rulemaking if one is required after you determine the scope of your authority under the existing rules? Will you do a rulemaking if it's necessary?
If the evaluation shows a rulemaking would be useful for transparency, yes.
Okay. Well, I think that's very important. I think that will really give the information to the public which they need. If people can go online to buy a car, they should be able to go online in order to determine if that car has a defect which could harm a family member. So the sooner you put it online, the sooner you put that information up, the sooner that you get that information out there, is the more accountable the industry is going to be. They'll know then that the consumers will be king. The consumers will be protecting their family. The consumers will be able to ensure that any successor NHTSA is accountable and ensuring that that information is made public. Now, Senator Blumenthal and I have another bill, and that bill is one that says that, that a used car that's now purchased by someone may have a recall that actually ensures that there is a free replacement part, but that the person who purchased the used car really doesn't know about it. So our bill would require that when that new owner registers their cars, that they're made aware of the safety defects and that those repairs are made. Would you support that kind of legislation, Dr. Rosekind?
DMV is a very important touch point to get those people informed. Grow America talks about this because at this point there's no sense yet of the technology to do that, the cost, the procedures, et cetera, and making sure that the consumers basically don't have any negative effects from a defect created by a manufacturer. So absolutely, DMVs could be a touch point that could be used. And in Grow America, we're suggesting pilot programs to work the technology, the cost procedures out to figure out how it could go national.
Okay, thank you.